What's up, everybody? Once
Hello,
again,
hello, hello. Happy Friday.
happy Friday.
Oh, look at that guy.
Yay!
Where you at? Where you at, you bastard?
Where's this
I'm
in the back
saying,
garden in Nottingham?
yeah, this is
That does
Ash's
not
back.
look like
This is
Nottingham. Way too bright.
Ash's
No,
yard right here.
not fooling anyone with that. Where you at, buddy?
I'm sat on a balcony in St Kitts, living island life, man. Living life.
Excuse us, office workers.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes, yeah. Sorry to disturb your afternoon.
Yeah.
that's right.
Oh,
This
it's
is my
morning actually,
office.
isn't it?
Quite an ironic topic, isn't it? Really, this is
Yeah,
my office for today.
yeah. But
You
you've
deserve
not
it,
been
buddy. You
working though, have
deserve it.
you? You're on
I
holiday.
have a little bit, always hustling, always
Really?
networking. You know that. You know that. You know that.
He's
Making friends at
networking.
the bar. Making
His
Yeah.
friends at the bar.
his networking plug is always on. Can't stop himself.
Has to be in any state of consciousness. It's always on, 100%. Anyway, let's get
How
to
was
it.
your week, man? How was your week 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Oh, man,
Everybody in the chat.
I'm
Go
in the Shire, man. I'm in the Shire territory this week.
on.
Like
You
honestly, I'm
are.
like in 12s, 15s, just next level.
You smashed it.
Learned a lot, drank a lot. I've got cheeseache because I've laughed a lot. Like it's just been good vibes, man. Definitely.
You just look different. I'll dare to say almost handsome.
No,
Almost.
I just look tired, mate. Let's be honest.
There is definitely a certain chilled aura about you.
And everyone keeps telling me to slow down. I told you that in the week. That everyone's just slow down, man. Slow down. I was like, what are you gonna worry about? I'm like, okay.
To be
Try.
fair, this is
Everyone.
the slowest I've seen you.
Mm.
Like in a good way, like in chilled out way. So yeah, come on then, everyone. Drop in the chat. How's your week, Ben?
Yeah, come on then.
Also
Give me
drop
some
your
scores.
names. Drop your
Where you
name.
coming
Where
from?
you're from? Yeah, he marks in there straight away.
Yes.
Give us a mark out of 10 on how your week's been.
How was
Yeah.
your week, Ash?
Yeah, come on. Fill it
Week's
up.
been good. Week's been good. Yeah, it's been. I finished another personal brand workshop. Well, actually, last week. So I was just finishing the document, and it was a case of in the workshop where it was kind of at the end of it, the vibe wasn't that great because it was just all that data all over the place. Before obviously we process it and stuff.
Yep.
And I was kind of, to be honest with you, I was a bit worried how the end of the call ended. And like, then we got in there, got the document over, and yeah, it was just really, really positive. Loved it, and she loved how it came together. So yeah, that was the highlight of my week.
This is
Really?
not good. Maggie's on 3 in the chat. Like I feel like I should counsel.
Maggie, get to St. Keys with Wes. He'll sort you out.
I know Maggie. Maggie's a friend of my sister who's in the HR space. So this is perfect episode.
What about you, Martin? How you joined this week?
Oh, 10. Great week.
10?
Last week, I was invited to 3 different events. It was the first time in my life. I had a panel in the morning and then a panel in the afternoon. Next day, I had a keynote, which was fully packed, fully booked. It was great.
And then a
Great,
tuxedo
great.
yesterday, huh?
And a tuxedo yesterday. I went to a gala dinner. Yeah, finally I got to use my wedding dress more than once. Not my personal wedding dress as a guest, which was great. Yeah, no, 10 out of 10, man.
Was that in Limassol?
It was in Nicosia. But I told you boys, like my personal brand it's happening now. It's been 5 years in the making, but now
You deserve it,
the
man.
seeds are popping.
You
Yeah,
deserve
really
it. I'm just curious. Like, is there any petitions in the chat? Because I made some friends and I've invited them to the day. Like, I'm just curious if actually they were serious or not.
Yeah, drop your name and say what's up to Wes. Don't let him down.
Right. Come on, let's roll into this.
Yeah.
This guy's
So
Who we got?
today's topic. So yeah, we were thinking about this. Like, there's still so many. It's dear to a lot of us. That work in offices and then were able to work from home, and now it's kind of coming back, and there seems to still be a trend of companies out there mandating that employees return to the office. And we just want to discuss, are these outdated ways of working, or is there something that we're missing? So we're going to unpack all of this with a little help from a well-known company culture expert. He's the guest of our show today. He's also a professor at California College of the Arts, an advocate for a culture-driven approach to business strategies, author of a book many of you might be most familiar with called Great Mondays, and host of podcast Great Mondays Radio. It's a brilliant show that you should go check it on YouTube. Great guests on there. It's none other than the man himself, Josh Levine.
Yes.
Hey everybody, what's up?
Make Mondays great again.
Yeah, make Mondays great. Didn't thought about that. That's good.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Come on, everybody. Let's
Yeah,
go.
Exactly.
So welcome to the Watercooler, Josh. How's it? So where are you based, actually, Josh? I forgot to ask that.
I am on the west coast of North America, Portland, Oregon.
Nice. You've always been there, have you?
What's that?
You've always been there, have you?
No, we moved up during the pandemic. I was in the Bay Area, cutting my teeth with all the tech folks for about 20 years. And then the pandemic was, kind of like, well, I guess if we could work anywhere, and it was something we always wanted to do. So that was the move. So we've been up here, and it's a little rainier, but not quite as rainy as maybe some
England.
of the Northern European countries. But
although when I visited, it did remind me a lot of the UK.
Yeah.
The weather,
definitely.
the greenery, like the scenic. It's really
Lots of green.
Really
Yep.
pretty.
So so we moved up here and love it, and great work-life balance, and continue to try to reach out, use all the tools to reach out to the world. Don't necessarily have, although I will say, and this will kind of lead into some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. I have to make more of an effort to get back down to the Bay Area. And so I always look for like reasons and excuses. So I just went back down for a conference, and I don't know if you guys have this where I never know, like it's kind of hard to know if a conference is going to be worthwhile. And but you have to show up, and it's like, oh man, I have to put my pants on, I have to go on the plane, I have to go, and it's like, oh, should I do this? And it's, you just have to like get over that hump. But I went down, spent 2 days in the Bay Area in San Francisco, Oakland actually, and was at this amazing conference. I saw so many people that I hadn't seen forever. And so it was just a reminder to me to like, I got to show up. Right, I got to show up in person every once in a while. So, that's that'll be part of our chat here. That'll be part of our chat.
Yeah. So let's get stuck into it. So, we said in the intro, there are still a lot of companies demanding, people get back to the office. What in your opinions, like really driving this motivation from organizations and leaders for these mandates? Like, is the argument about increased productivity, or is there something else? Like I said, we're probably missing.
One word: anxiety.
Okay.
I think my observation is it's this, it's kind of like the rubber band snaps back, and organizations, leaders, and managers they're like, the vibe isn't right. Like, it's not like it used to be around here. And that is, then you can sort of backfill it with all these like, well, productivity and innovation and all that stuff. So, and I think part of it also, I'm sure you've heard, is like, how do I know what people are doing? How do I know that they're working? Maybe they're doing laundry all day. I don't know. Which I think is obvious. Like, I just think it's if you've got that problem, then you got a bigger problem. Let's just say that. So that's my hunch as to kind of this mentality. And I hope it's not a surprise to say I think it's a mistake to force people back to make these rules. It's so levels of mistakes, I think, here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that trust one. Like you said, it's a whole bigger issue, isn't it? I remember when I used to work for a company. This was years ago, and I was working from home. It was my first home-based role, And the amount of micromanaging that I got as a senior person was so off-putting. It just made my life hell. So there's that extreme, isn't there?
Yeah.
Do you see that with the clients, like, you work with, all case studies that you've seen?
I mean, it's the same. I mean, I don't know whether that's someone's style, but it's like, it's certainly out there, right? It's certainly like, I would say RTO is return to office is the ultimate micromanagement. You know, it's like, which seat are you going to sit in? Like that's what I would call it. So if you're, I mean, it's very easy to slip down that slope. I mean, if you're anxious but you can't quite get people back, and so you want to be, you're going to be wondering what they're doing. And my definition of culture, right, is the cause and effect of every decision that you make. So if your boss, right, if you're senior director, if you're the manager and there's a senior director above you and they're like, hey, your team's not doing X, Y, and Z, or you're not delivering on your numbers, you're going to get all fucking, like, and you're going to be like, hey, what's everybody doing? We're not delivering on numbers. And then it's just like, I don't know. It's just one of those things. I just, it's sort of it's the antithesis, right? Like, I want the antithesis of sort of the Great Monday's credo of like I want to be able to, it's like, I believe that if you hire good intentioned, smart people and give them the lens through which to understand the work and the world and what you're trying to do, and then you allow them to sort of bloom in that role, you give them, and it's not that you don't need management, but we can talk about sort of how different organizations are structured, and like, are you going to hire all senior people? Do you need junior people to kind of like get the hours, the hours a little bit, dilute the hours a little bit, and so you can be more profitable? All those things kind of fit into it. But ultimately, I think we're at this moment, and I've been thinking a lot about this, where we are there's so much going on. We're moving so fast. I guess, markets, businesses, companies, innovation, all blah, 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 all that stuff, that we're like, in the current moment, we can't answer emails any fucking faster. You know what I mean? Like, just as a sort of metaphor for it, like, it's like, all right, do more, faster work. And so if we're going, like, the mandates or the micromanagement of where, when you work is dialed, like, you're losing, like, you're going to lose that battle, right? It's almost the difference between the, scarcity mindset and sort of the abundance mindset. And I don't think that businesses are going to be able to kind of create that escape velocity to keep up with what's happening in the world, the speed that we need, if we're going to be like, you need to be doing it like this. It's like, it's just not possible. Like, you're wasting your time. Someone's sitting there micromanaging you. Like, where's the benefit? Like, where's the productivity multiplier?
Yeah. But 100%, everything fucking changed after COVID, right? I think COVID had to make us work from home, even from companies that never ever considered. So much changed so quickly. And is there a correlation between the companies that never considered working from home, they had to consider working from home, they had to patch it up during COVID, and the reality is that now they didn't patch it up successfully, and now they haven't figured it out. So their comfort zone is like, let's go back to where it was before.
Yeah, I mean, then I think the organizations that are making that call, the Amazons or the investment banking firms in New York, at least that's, the ones that I know of, they're like, okay, you have to come back, because they weren't able to take advantage of this or see this as an advantage. This is maybe I'm come jumping to the punchline here, but we're at a moment where I think we have the opportunity, organizations have the opportunity to reinvent actually how it's done. And we're trying to do the old way in a new world, and that was like
Yeah.
the old methods in a new world. And so, Martin, to answer your question, every organization is going to be able to handle this. This is like a incredible in market case study on like how organizations deal with change. Right? Are you going to be like, and then like go back to the way it was? I don't know I gotta like, versus like, is there an opportunity here? That's where I think. And look, I'm not. This is all hard. I mean, we all know it's hard as shit. Like this going to like trying to make those decisions. And during it was 2022. I was working with an organization to try to make that like help them define what work was going to look like for them. And one of the main struggles, and this is just an example, right? It's like, well, who has to be in the office, who could be in the office, and who will never be in the office. And then you get this backlash of like, it's unfair. And I have other clients too, where it's like, if you're front of house, if you're staff versus like white collar, there's this huge gap. So it's like, that's just one teeny little example of like how complicated and how complex this can be, because everybody's still freaking out, right? You're dealing with humans. And so I understand you want to retreat to safety. And it's like, if you're at all worried about the direction of that trend line around productivity or innovation or whatever your excuse is, you're going to be, you know what? I'm exhausted from trying to fight these people. You got to come in on Tuesdays, or what about Thursdays, or how about this? And I'm going to go and win, and I'm going to fly people in. And like, you know what? Just bring them back. It was so much easier.
Yeah.
Josh, do you think there's a question in the chat, but it kind of backs into what I was going to say. Do you think this is a generational thing? Do you think like, all the old boys, you mentioned like New York banking and the old boys at Amazon, like, is it a generational thing that's like not wanting or resisting change, or is it, or is it more than that?
Yeah. I think the younger generations are more capable of have the ability. They grew up with digital. They understand and are less anxious about the possibility of doing things from your phone, right? There's just, and I don't think it's a blanket statement, but I do think there is a tendency, the younger you are, the more likely you're going to be able to grapple with and sort of like pull in this capacity to be able to work from home. Now there is a confounding, I'm sure there's a million confounding factors, which is the question around how do you mentor remotely? And I think it's a valid question. And what do you learn from being in person together? And there's a lot of nuances. I want to make it clear though, before we get too far, there is a ton of value in being in person in the same room.
Absolutely.
But brand designers, graphic designers, creatives, does it have to be a light bulb, right? Like, does it have to be 5 days a week, right? Like that you want to ask, you're always asking your clients, right? You're like, oh, does it have to be a, 3 trifold brochure, right? Like they're like, come here, I want to give you this assignment. And you're like, what if we did, right? So it's like, there's 100,000 different ways that we can bring people together. And one of the, I have a couple examples, and I know there's sort of this like you want to get into this, but I think it's an appropriate time to sort of start to
please do. Yeah.
Is that all right? We can
absolutely
go to that. All right. So is this the case studies segment of Watercooler?
This is your water cooler.
This is
that's not a joke about it.
Whatever you want. One of the ways that I've been doing my most popular talk, I try to sell a lot of different things. I try to sell whatever people want, I'm willing to sell them. But the most popular talk that I've been giving for the past 2.5 years is how to rebuild culture on distributed teams, so hybrid or remote. And what's happening, and this ties in exactly to what we've been talking about, is that managers and executives are seeing they look at the results, right? They look at the score of the game and they're like, man, either they're not delivering like they used to, or kind of doesn't feel like they're driving, or like the innovation isn't quite there. They're not quite as, I don't know, you can call it productivity. And so that's the reaction, right? Okay, well, let's just bring it back to where it was. But the truth is that the fundamental reason those things are happening is because the teams are breaking down, and the teams are breaking down because those relationships aren't being maintained. So we used to work in the same room, and there was this, or same building, and we can, there was a study about how often you see people depending on what floor they're on, and there's, it's kind of an interesting case, but the hard work that the square footage that we used to walk around on used to do, it's gone away. And so now there's no thing doing that work of, hey, it's like enabling us to have those collisions, right? There's that like
bump into each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
The water
Right?
cooler.
The water cooler, right? Exactly, right? Like the coffee machine, right? We used to design offices because they're like, okay, well, I talked to an architect, and they were designing the office, and they're like, we're going to put the whole one coffee station in the middle as opposed to two at the end, right? So we can get collisions. Okay, so that's gone away. We don't have that anymore. Okay, now what? So what you're seeing is we no longer have those interactions. We don't know the people. Maybe there's people that we've never even met in person. And the core, the fundamental building block of great teamwork is trust. If you don't have relationships, you are not going to have trust. And that, my theory, is what's driving all that innovation down, down, down. It's productivity down, down, down. The work together down, down, down. And so one of the ways, I have a couple different, modes for and exercises for bringing people back together, even when you're 100% remote. But one of the things I say is you have to bring people together. I don't care how often. I don't care, for how long. So earlier this year, I did this amazing interview on my podcast, Great Mondays Radio, with Tony Stubline, who is the CEO of Medium.com. And Medium has always been a 100% remote organization. And I thought it was really great to have him on because I wanted to hear what was going on. But I think they were remote, like Automatic, also, right? The company behind WordPress, 100% remote, right? There's these companies that just sort of started that way. And I wanted to, hear from him what he's been doing. They have people, right? So I think it's like 100 employees, but they're all over the world. And he and I got into this really great conversation about how he brings everybody together for basically like 3 days, plus or minus on either side, somewhere different around the world once a year. And what they do in that time is inherently they're going to be bonding, right? They get to be in person, but they're working through their strategy. And there's so much benefit derived that in his mind, the amount of expense that it requires to fly everybody in, host everybody at a place, rent it out. He's like, we earn that back in productivity within a month of that event. And he's doing it twice a year now.
Mm.
And that's a great example. I think you have to come together at least once a year. I think that's really important. Airbnb is another example. So they have their live and work anywhere program that they introduced in 2022, sort of midway through 2022. And their policy is, of course, right? But I love this because like Airbnb is like, they've got the infrastructure for it, right? Like it's beautiful, but it's like leading the way. And so they said, look, you could be wherever, people are working from sailboats, apparently. There was an article that I saw about it. But one of the caveats, there was like 4 the 4 or 5 commandments of whatever comes along. But one of the caveats is once a quarter, you have to come together with your team for an entire week. Great. Love it. Love that idea. That where it's regular, repeated time together. In the office, it doesn't matter. Let's meet on the boat or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's meet at St. Kitts, right? Like, it doesn't matter where. But let's spend some time together. Now, the other important aspect of this is purposefully scheduling this. If you are just showing up to the office randomly, all you're going to be doing is just having the same freaking Zooms just from your office that's a little too cold, right? Like, and then you have to put on pants, right? And I don't know, a couple of years ago, I wrote an article with a colleague of mine. And the title was, I had to put pants on for this. And you're like, I could have just done this from home. Like, what is this? So those are the two pieces, right? Like, rigorous hybrid this is what I call it. I don't know that it's very catchy, but like, that's kind of the term that I'm putting out there, where it's like specific time, specific place, specific purpose for the meeting. And I'll summarize it by saying, on-site is the new off-site. On-site is the new off-site, right? Because you would never go, hey, executive team, we're having an off-site, show up here. I don't know, we'll just get some work done, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you have to do. It has to be purposeful.
So it's about setting expectations then.
Goals and aspiration. And like Tony did, where it's like, hey, we're looking at next year, right? It's kind of like that sales kickoff that everybody does, right? It's sort of like, hey, here are the products coming out. Here's what we're doing. Here are the big questions. What Tony was talking about is like, here are the big questions. We're going to make some decisions together. And they like essentially have this like, overarching vision. And then we talk about what the strategy is. And then they move into tactics. And guess what? By the end of the 3 days, everybody knows what they're going to go do. And you know what you can do really well? Distributed tactics. You can just execute the crap out of things. And that to me is like, oh, now we're starting to think like, now this is for me the model or part of how we want to think about what new work could look like.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Josh, because like I know Martin's got a question, but this is following like the Kubler-Ross change curve, but like in culture, right? It's the people that, like acceptance, then hangers on, then new change, then new benefits, and then you come out the other side and it's a new, it's a new habit, right? It's a new way.
You get outside better than where you were starting.
Yeah, but you've got to go through the through the shit, really. Before you get to the other side,
You do, but the problem, and I'll just tie this back to the beginning of our conversation, which is complex, complicated, really hard, slowing down, having to really rethink the business. And you're like, fuck, we were doing fine before. Yeah. The truth is that maybe that would be okay. And if you went back, you'd be okay for a year, 18 months, 36 months, maybe. But you know what? The long game is not about the way we used to work. I just think that there's going to have to be a massive shift.
And it's hard. You said it, Josh. It's hard. Like I have a company of 30, and we just changed office last year, and we're spending 100,000 in office every year, and and you see the number of attendants, and sometimes it's demoralizing from an employer perspective, right? So I made that change from employee to employer a couple of years ago, and like I want to see people in the office, right? So it's my obsession lately, right? And you're right. Like it's about the building the trust, and the absolute perfect example is Airbnb, because their purpose is belong anywhere, right? And they brought that to life. So I want to go a bit more into the structure, because this book and the frameworks in this book, the exercises in this book, and the stuff you talk about it is really theoretical at the beginning, but they always give such an amazing breakdown into the frameworks and how to bring it to life. So if help me understand, how can we then do better from a company perspective? How do we get to that trust, and how do we get to that, like not having to micromanage the shit out of it and have this anxiety?
Yeah. Well, again, I would say the number one, and this is, I wrote the book pre-pandemic. It's this year's the 5-year anniversary of the book.
That's another question. Let's not get into that. But that's another question for later, because I want to ask you that as well later.
Okay. But what the component, right, of the 6 components, the one that I'm leaning into, and the one that popular talk is all about rituals, because this is going to be the fun until we get that on the curve. Oh, he's pulling out the poster. Rarity now. We don't print those anymore. So
I love this. I love this.
it makes my
the ritual is what you were saying before about coming together every year,
That's
right?
right. So rituals are repeated activities that build and strengthen relationships. Relationships are the synapses of culture. Relationships are the synapses of culture. So when we think about, we cannot have anything else if we don't have trust in our team. If you can imagine someone that you felt you had deep trust with on a particular team, and how much more productive you were, was going, and then someone that you were like, I don't know if they're going to get their work done, or I don't know if, it's like I have clients, right? Some of them I have like immense trust with, and some of them I don't, just because of the way that they're acting or following up or not following up or whatever it might be. And I mean, it's the best feeling in the world when you have trust with somebody, because you can just be like, hey, I'm not going to be like, oh, they're going to think I'm being a dick. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to worry about all that extra stuff. So that's my argument, is we have to get really good at building rituals. This is a new skill that managers have to really get familiar with. And I would argue maybe all employees have to get familiar with. Which is, how do you create an environment where you get to understand who your colleagues are, both outside of work, so you can see them as human beings and not jerks that are just asking you to do extra work. You have to stay late or whatever it is, right? You've got to have empathy for them. You got to see the person on the other side of the screen. And you have to be able to know when you build a little more trust, then you can ask deeper questions. And so, it's like the work styles. How do you like to be communicated with? How do we create team level agreements that enable us to work more smoothly? So when I think about rituals, right? So rituals can be any number of things, right? So in the book, I give an example where it's like, okay, we're gonna, once a year do our habitat, take our team to do Habitat for Humanity, which is like, a volunteer home building program that's popular. I remember early days, Square in downtown San Francisco. They had an office in a building that was in a shitty part of town. And what they would do is they would go out and actually go and clean up the neighborhood together, which I really thought, that was, so great on so many levels. But also rituals can be about learning from somebody else. And so one of the key tools that I am now have, kind of really dug into and learning is the concept of active listening and being able to listen to somebody. So what I teach in this particular field, I'm sure folks that have been in management, know about active listening. But what is so powerful is when you can ask a question of somebody and they can answer, and you don't interrupt. You're not listening to poke holes in it. You're not listening to judge. You are just listening to understand. And if you can understand what that person is, really about, when you start to ask some of these questions, you can then build that trust. And it's a double bonus, because one, you've learned something about them. Hey, where was your last trip, St. Kitts, or whatever it is? Oh, okay, tell me more. What's your favorite app? Whatever it is, right? Like super, I like to start with, I start my workshops with, if people introduce themselves at their tables or in the breakouts. And the last question is, what is your favorite breakfast? And people just light up. They love telling you that. And it tells you a little something and what you actually do. And this is a surface level, like very inoffensive question, right? If you don't know anybody in the room, you want to start with those easy questions. But so what happens is you not only learn about them, but they feel heard and seen, which is really all we want as humans. And so what we need to do is get really good at active listening, really good at asking questions and then just listening. And we don't do that. It's just not something that we naturally do. And once the second piece of this, and I actually do 3 iterations in my workshops, because you have the first set of questions, which are like those, like, what's your breakfast? What's your app? Where do you want to go? What's your favorite movie? Right? Those kind of basic things. And then you can go a little bit deeper. Hey, tell me, what are your, how do you like to be communicated with? It's a little more like work relevant questions, or tell me something, an influential event that happened in your life. You can't start with that. If you don't know somebody, it's like they're going to not want to be vulnerable. And then we get to the third level. And the third level is like, okay, tell me a time about a mistake you made and what did you learn from it? Right. I love going to the mistake question because nobody wants to be seen as like, someone who can, who's failed at something.
Mm.
But if you have trust, that's a great way to build trust. And so what we're teaching is how to create deep human connections that then brings forward that trust. And so to your question, okay, tell me specifically. Great. So when you have your weekly stand-up, maybe trade off, it's someone's responsibility to ask another question of the group. Or we have the manager says, hey, everybody, wear your favorite hat to the meeting, or whatever it might be. Is a great way to get started. And what we don't have, and this is the hard thing, you guys, what we don't have, and everybody's experienced this, everybody nods their head, which is we don't create the space for those interstitial conversations that this is going to foster. When we used to show up to meetings in person, you get there early, or you saw them in the hallway, right? And you're just going to, like, as a human, you're like, hey, how was your weekend? And you got to learn that. Now, look, shitty relationships happened way before the pandemic. And so maybe you didn't do that. And maybe this is the opportunity to be more deliberate about those relationship building activities. And when you show up, right, what happens immediately when you show up to your Zoom meeting? You're like, all right, everybody, we got things to do. I'm very busy. Here's the list of things we got to come, it's like, okay, Martin, give me the thing. Okay, great. Updates. Fantastic. All right, good. I got to go. Right. Like, it's like we were on back. That's why our Zoom meetings were so fatiguing during the pandemic, is because it was just like, pop, 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 pop. So where the reason why I said this is hard, the reason why it's hard is because we've got so much shit to do.
Yeah.
But it's like,
so, Joe,
you have to create that space.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the skill.
On that, Josh,
never taught about.
Yeah. So on that, like, I'm a firm believer in this, and actually my time being in the States, working in these environments long before the pandemic, but I was forced to, like, learn and understand emotional intelligence as a tool, right? So how much do you lean into, like, people that are going to, incentivize the circle, which I'm going to come on to again in a second, but how much do you encourage, people or your clients to actually start delving into emotional intelligence using tools like, I don't want to say DISC, but maybe like Belbin or Tetramap, so we can actually understand how to talk to certain profiles, how to relate information back and forth, how to go into that first question and how they're going to respond to it. Like, I learned so much about that, especially when going into workshops and facilitation. Yeah. That's was like superpower. Do you know what I mean? And so, how much do you lean into that?
Yeah, I love it. I'm not an expert into that, but what I will say is, it is very useful to. And what you're asking about, right? These, like, whether the DISC or the MBTI or whatever it might be, right? Or like your, I don't know, Strength Finder, right? It's like, how it's answering the question. It's a structured way to answer the question, how do I like to work? And what am I good at? Because what you want to do is give people the conditions to do their best work. That's how we're going to create escape velocity to get out of how we used to work in the 2010s. And so we're like, oh, I'm the, it's like, I'm the team builder, or I'm the, I'm the doer, or I'm whatever it is, right? What gives you that energy? What are you excellent at? What's your superpower? We want to be able to set up a condition. Part of that condition is, who are you working with? So that's another one, right? Like your super team of 4 or 10, or who's doing what. So it's self-awareness, and it's team awareness. And I think that's really powerful. Again, not my forte, but the connection that you're making there is a really good one, because we do not underperforming or performing at beneath our real capacity is, I just think it's going to drag organizations down. And so how do we lift people up? And here's the good news. It's not just great for the business. It's great for the people. It's great for the employees. Hell yeah. I want to do less of the shit that I'm not good at and more of the shit that I'm good at. And sometimes you don't have the opportunity, but like, if you can, you can match people up. You're like, bang, when you're, when your team's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I've witnessed that like firsthand. Like I think the change in my management career actually happened when my boss sent me to an away day, and he's like, "You got to go to this thing. You got to do." And I was like, "Come on, man." I was like mid-20s. I was like, "Why are you fucking sending me to this shit?" Like, I don't want to. I mean, but I came out and I felt like a Jedi. It was crazy. And then fast forward 10 years, these boys will tell you. Like, I remember going home, and I just moved in with my partner now. And it's first time living with someone, and she loaded the dishwasher like a fucking, I don't know, like a uneducated lumberjack. Like shit was going in that direction, right? And I was like, right, I need to try and get a way through to her to try and load this thing in a way where it's logical and we can get more shit in it. Therefore, we have to do less shit. And I literally used my emotional intelligence, and I figured out like if I could show her the end result. And that got through to her, then when she was doing that, she'd think about the end result. And it's all about delivery and exception, right? And going into management and into culture, which you're the don of, like as soon as I learned how to deliver to my team that we had to work late, or we had to work past 10 o'clock because we had a pitch, or like I intensified so much because I knew the end result. My team had we had rules in New York where if you stayed past 8, you'd get a pizza, or you get a $20 allowance for food. And if you stay past 10, you've got a Lincoln home. And honestly, just that little switch in understanding that there's a little reward there, there's a little appreciation. My whole team, as an intern, I told these boys, my first job did that, and that's where I got it from. And I obviously implemented it later. As an intern, I literally worked every day till 10 o'clock at night because I was going to get fed and I could get a ride home. And my whole internship, for like a year, I literally was there till 10 because there was just a mindset change,
I mean, yeah. So, at the beginning of the book, it's like culture's more. I write that culture's more than ping pong and pizza, and here you are saying, well, the answer is pizza. But what I would say is that because that's a policy, it is acknowledging that I see you. This company sees you. Your manager sees you.
Yeah.
And I get that for sure. I did time at when I was a young graphic designer at VSA in Chicago, and I was on this team when we were doing a pitch for, I don't know, it was like Coors or something. And it was like every fucking night we would just crank it, midnight oil. And it was like the manager was like, okay, I'm here with you, and we're going to order food in, and we're going to do this together. And you know what? I'm game. Let's fucking do it. Right.
And you totally appreciate and respect that. Like it's, and my story I'm telling you is like 99, 2000. So it's long before all this kind of new age movement. But I think the second part I wanted to dig in, going back to the wheel, is you mentioned rituals. And if anyone knows your book, you start on one thing and then you end on, cues, and it creates this ecosystem. So what things or, foundations in brand do you think a company needs, or even a person needs to get these rituals right?
Well, I think the best rituals are going to tie back to the team, the people, and what that brand stands for and what people are passionate about. 2 years ago, I think, I did an offsite for the leadership of the San Francisco Public Library. And we ended the day. Well, there's two things. I want to make sure I don't confuse them. We ended the day with, and this is how I usually facilitate these workshops, breaking them into teams and having them come up with ideas for rituals, and then we kind of vet and improve and sort of switch back and forth, and decide as a group. I don't tell you what to do, what you're going to do, and that is part of the decision making, is getting those people together. And earlier in the day, one of the goals of the workshop was to rebuild relationships. And so what we did was we had everybody before the workshop pick their favorite book, and then we collected all the books, and then we set them up, and then they had to guess whose was whose. Who had whose favorite book was X, Y, and Z, and then they would explain it. We go in the room. And what I like about that is, like, these are librarians, people. Like, of course they're going to like books. And and that was wonderful. And one of the examples of one of the rituals was a book club. Duh, that makes sense, right? Like, and so all of a sudden it's like, the pushback I'll get is like, forced fun, blah, right? Like, culture building, blah, right? But if it's like, how do you make it? I would say the answer to your question in one word is authenticity. What is authentic to your culture? And how do you make sure that it means something to the people? It doesn't always have to be deep meaning. You can, hey, what was the first live concert, the first live show you ever went to? Everybody shares that. Oh, cool. Right. What's your breakfast? And if there's something that you're really going to lean into, make sure it's something that everybody is bought into. No matter how well, like how much you think as a leader, your team, but why not give them an opportunity to create that ritual with you, or at least get an opinion? Because then they're part of the process. Then they're really part of this.
Josh, question here. If there's someone that's a leader that's skeptical about going, like the hybrid model or introducing more flexibility, but then they listen to you and they say, okay, well, listen, I'm kind of half bought in. Let's try it. How do we measure these things? That's going to be a big deal for them, isn't it? Like, how do we measure if it's going to work or not? How do you approach that? Or how do you measure these things?
So I would caution everybody to make sure to understand that there's leading and lagging indicators. So your profitability, or it's like what you are looking for at the end is the lagging indicator. So don't look for that. Don't look for that at the beginning, because it ain't gonna move. What we need to be looking at on experiments, and I like the way that we're putting this, right? We're doing a little prototype. We're doing an experiment. A lot of organizations did this with the 4-day work week. There's a lot of articles around that. So what is it that you're looking for? And I think, while you can't ignore the output, I do think what you want to think about is how the humans are engaging with the system. And one of the key aspects, and we know this from a number of studies, is autonomy. We want more autonomy in our lives, and we want to be able to, I'm going to have more energy and more ability to contribute if I have more autonomy. So when people say I want flexibility, what they're really saying is I want autonomy. So you could ask about how much autonomy you feel you have? And also, do you have what you need to do your best work? That's a common question in some of these engagement surveys. So I think those are some of the early leading indicators. Now, there's also the don't, it's like you're going to get conflated with everybody's like, yeah, I love working at home, right? That's sort of the pushback, right? It's like, I don't have to commute. It's the best thing ever. And you're going to get those data points too. But that may not be, I mean, that's what we're considering, is like, everybody's like, well, it's easier to be lazy at home, right? I love it. But I think that's a false, that's going to be like, do you like this? And you can't ask that question. That's not what we're going for here. So the first is, do you have the stuff, the ability to do the work that the best of your ability to do your work? I think then the next leading indicator is going to be what is getting accomplished. And if the manager is seeing that, and I think what you have to do is define before the experiment and maybe get some numbers around that. Like, what are you trying to achieve? So if you're trying to achieve the same thing that you were now at a hybrid that you were before, then you have that data. But maybe it's an opportunity to try something new and be more like, introduce a new thing. Like, we're going to be more innovative, or we're going to do more asynchronous work. And what is that going to enable us to do? So you have to tie it back to some sort of, you have to be rigorous, right? With any kind of experiment. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are you trying to achieve? And is it the same as the other stuff? But my hypothesis is it's going to be faster. It's going to be better. It's going to be exactly the same. And so if you're cranking out, like, if everybody's, it's like, well, let's do brand, right? Like, okay, so how quickly you're going to get through building out this strategic deck, or how many thumbnails are you submitting, or how it's like, what's the critiques, how effective are the critiques, or what's the output? It's going to be really hard. It's going to take a few years for you to go, you know what, our productivity, it's like the way that our clients are responding to our work is better, is worse. Like, that's just going to be really hard to measure. But I think what you do have inherently in the system is you have those managers that, and their job is to like really be aware of what's happening. But don't just go into it and being like, I don't know, I guess let's see if it works. You have to be pretty rigorous with it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, and you got to choose your own data points. I don't have an easy answer, right? It's not like, okay, measure engagement. It's what strategy, like, what are you trying to accomplish? Because efficiency is very different from innovation. We all know that, right? Like, okay, quickly be creative doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe it's at the end of your long brand careers, you're going to be, like with Neumeier, right? Like, he can just, the best idea is the first one and it's done, right? But it's like, that's a rare talent, and he's he's got a lot of years behind him. So that's where I would suggest is like, what are you trying to get done? What is it you're trying to do? How do you measure that? How do you like, what is it that you want to achieve? And that's what you're going to try to like look at and decide how you're going to measure that.
All right.
Brilliant.
Let's move into lifting the hood on Josh a little bit then, shall we?
Wes, your segment.
Let's get some. Okay, so I always ask this question straight off the bat. What song do you sing in the shower? What's your anthem? Come on, man. Hit me.
Oh my gosh. Gosh.
Come on,
Well, I guess, I mean, you're kind of asking, my family makes fun of me because I'll come down in the morning, and I'm always singing some sort of iteration on some old like television ad, like some cereal ad or something. I don't know why. They're like, what are you doing? Why do you do that? And it's like, I always like, I don't know. I'm just like the silly dad, I guess. I don't know. But like, that's what I'll like, to be honest, that's what I'm doing in the morning. If you're asking about like singing in the shower, I'm like, I don't know, whatever like last, like dream I had, I get up and I'm like, whatever, Cheerios or something.
It's funny.
Like, what the hell is wrong with you? So
I always try and like make hip hop into opera. So,
Oh, I
you
love it.
start like,
That's great.
yeah,
Yes,
go on
that's
the
the
50
vibe.
East side on the
That's the
LBC
vibe.
on a mission trying to find stuff.
That's the. I
That's
love
kind of
it.
my
I love
thing.
it for sure. For sure. That's the right. Yeah, different outcome. But that's the right vibe.
Totally.
We need to have a
Oh,
clip
man.
of that just to promote this episode where you
Mate,
singing hip hop opera.
you guys have hung around with me so long. You've never heard me do that.
I've never heard you do that. We probably do it in the shower.
Yeah, probably, but you can normally hear me. Anyway.
Yeah.
So the bit. I'll only ask you one question. I want to ask another question because of the emotional intelligence bit. But if something we always start off a workshop with, like, if you were a candy or a cookie, what would you be and why?
Oh, good. Okay. A bag of M&Ms. A bag of peanut M&Ms.
Amazing.
Okay.
Peanut. Okay.
And the reason why is inherently, if I don't have structure, I'm just all over the fucking place. I'm going to be on the floor. Like, it's like you just open if I don't have the container, it's just like everywhere. Maybe it should be nerds, right? Like it just goes.
Yeah, even worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glitter. But if I can put all those things together, if I can keep all my nuts together, it's very dense and it's very nutritious, right? There's a lot there.
Thank God it's Friday.
That's a clip. I heard one.
Such a good answer, Josh.
Yeah.
Such a good
Glad I
answer.
delivered. They did not. For those of you, gentle listener, if there are those of you listening at home, they did not. They gave me all these questions that they were probably going to ask, and that was not one of them. So I'm on the fly here.
And then
Good
another thing
answers.
we always amazing. Another thing we always ask is, like, if you could ask us a question, what would that be? Like, have you got any questions for us? Ash hates this. He actually loves it. But he hates it.
Repeat it again. What did you say?
Basically, have you got any questions that, like, off the hip? Like, have you got
Ask
any
us
questions for
something.
us?
Oh, ask you guys something.
Yeah.
All right. So I come from brand strategy, right? That's where I started. And the story that I apply in reverse, right? Because we can only see our stories in reverse, was I left brand strategy and brand because organizations could not deliver on the brand promises that we were helping them make. So I haven't been in brand in a long time, but in your experience, are organizations more or less likely to be able to understand how to deliver on those brand promises?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think on the surface level, things did change, there is a lot of weaponization of brand because of the presence of red ocean, right? So people need to find something to look as different, and it's the only thing left to try is fucking bread. So there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that happening, but there is still tons of complete misunderstanding of what brand is, and we have tons of the conversation. And I know for the other three, why I build my personal brand is to have better conversation and not to have to pitch, but start problem solve. And I know Wes is the same. I know Ash is the same. So in a way, there has been some movement, but general lack of understanding is still ruling it.
I think to piggyback that on, though, I think the brands that we've worked with, or companies that we work with, that are moving and making successful brands, is they're actually understanding that you have to activate this thing. So if it just sits in a deck, and it's written poetry and it's beautiful, if you don't activate this thing, I always say, like, a brand needs a pulse, right? We need to keep this thing alive, and the moment you don't, you need that defibrillator to bring it back to life. And if you don't activate, it's dead. It's literally soulless.
What were we all wasting our lives on, right? Like,
exactly, it's pointless.
And the three of us, when we work together, this is what we say, like only start to work together if you are able to activate it, because otherwise you're wasting your time and we are wasting our time. We don't want to. And Wes says is we don't want to give birth to stillborns.
I don't want to do that. Yeah, and that comes from my career back in the US. Like, I was in a branding agency. No disrespect, but we would literally it'd be like a cash cow. You'd literally, like, create a brand, pass it off, okay, and then everyone would wonder why this thing failed. And I was just sat there as a junior, then going into senior, then into director level. I'm like, we can't just let this thing go, man. Like, the irony is like it gives us a bad perception of reputation because we're just failing. We're delivering stillborns, as I say. Like we can't do that anymore. Like it's so we've introduced things,
And the other component to that is as well is having alignment from the start. So having as many different voices in the room to actually start building it from the beginning, and then they invested in executing it together, right? And there's been times where we've said no to clients where they'll say, "Oh no, it's just going to be
four people,
C-suite leaders in the room.
It's going to be the C-suite,
and we'll cascade it.
Good luck,
and everyone will do as we tell them to."
Yep.
That's not building a brand.
And we always get kickback. Like another little famous thing I say, and if we ever pitch to anyone that hear this from me, but I always have a slide in our pitch. It's just got like the tools of an operating table, right? And I've said, like, okay, I need everyone everyone that's a key influencer in your business that's got, outward facing insight from right through to the top. Even like the cleaner, if you need to bring the janitor in, do that because they know things, and you've probably never heard these things. But I always say, like, it's going to be probably between 8 to 16 hours that we're going to work with you. And if I could operate on you for 16 hours and extend your life for 25 years, would you say no? And literally and then the more people we get in, the more buying we're getting, right? There's no, the diluted whispers that come out of that boardroom into the rest of the business because they've all heard it. And back to your point, going to the rituals, they've all participated in this thing with the same reasoning, so they can't argue against it when they're out of the room, can they? They've all justified this thing together, and then it gives a better chance of surviving.
Yeah, I love that, and I will say this is a nice little button. It's exactly how I run my programs. And I failed when I first started doing culture work. We couldn't get off the ground because of exactly that. It was only the C-suite. Now, and this is what I wrote in the book, and this is like the biggest, this is the biggest, it's not a secret, this is the biggest tool that I share with the world is I get those executives to appoint culture ambassadors. Those are the people that are going to be both connected to, they believe, the future of the organization as well as the day-to-day, because guess what? The larger the organization, the more disconnected from the real work the executive team has. And they think they know, right? Oh, we think our values are going to be this, that, and the other thing. But really those are platitudes. Mm-hmm. And so that's exactly what I do is make sure to get the real people. And the magic in this is that you didn't choose them. It's all the C-suite are like, hey, these people are amazing. And I make those people or try to get those people in the room to present because those are the ones that they respect. And if they can't listen to those people, it's what they usually do, right? They can't go, who's this? Who taught? Who did? It's like, they don't know me from Jack. I mean, we're going to, it's like I try to get to know them and those executives and build those relationships, of course. But like, they don't need to take my word for it. But what about their their 5 high potentials? Mm-hmm. If they don't listen to them, who are they going to they got to know that. Yeah. So I love that you're talking about it in the same way. It's the only way. I've got a lot of great ideas. I'll write up some amazing values for you, but that doesn't mean shit if you're not going to take it. And we need you to be part of the process. We need you to believe in it. And then we're really cooking. Then we can get started working.
I love that. Something that makes me constantly sick is the value acronyms printed behind the reception board. And as soon as I enter an office and there is that, I'm like, oh, fuck's sake. They got the value acronym in place. What the fuck
a great mnemonic. You
can
do it. Like I had a client once. They're like, "Can you make it an acronym?" And I was like, for weeks. I'm like, get rid. Do it was like
epic, smart, hope.
I mean, there is. I would say there is value to that because it helps you remember it. There's so much shit going on.
True.
You want to remember. You want something to hang on to.
Yeah.
But I think what you're reacting to is the inauthenticity, the sort of the platitudes, right? Where it's like teamwork, and you're like, it's not it needs to be a strategic choice. Is it this or that? Both of them are valuable. Is it like, it's like, oh, integrity, right? Integrity. Like I have this slide I show in my class where it's like a bunch of Fortune 500 companies and all of their values. And it's like, you just highlight integrity. Everybody's got integrity. You're like, what's the fucking opposite? But like, what? That's not a value. That's an HR violation, right? Like what? That's not what we're talking about here. And it's, I think that we need more. Values can be an incredible tool to establish expectations around how do we behave when things get hard, and how do we stretch forward? How do we make a difference in the next, 18, 24, 36 months? What are the 4 or 5 things that we need to change that's going to move the fucking needle? And that's what we're going to get laser focused on. I don't want to see 12 values. I don't even want to see 6 values. You get a maximum of 5 values, because otherwise I don't know what I'm doing day to day. I got so many things going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes 5 is even too much. And so there's like, let's prioritize. It's an exercise in prioritization. Let's prioritize. What's the 3 things you want to be working on in the next 18 to 36 months? And then we can take a look. Ownership, fantastic. You got a problem with that? Let's move that, right? Like that's how we change the culture of an organization, is we focus on what's the next big thing that we need to make sure this organization is starting to do correctly. Hey, we need to be more clear about our failures or reward our failures so that we can then be more comfortable with, experiments. Because if you're just yelling at everybody to be more innovative, you ain't getting anywhere. Why aren't you more creative?
What we need more? Innovation. What we need more? Creative. When? No.
Right. And INNOV. Hey, TIN.
That sounds a bit like when these two see my decks. I'm not a designer. So they tell me to get more creative.
We've tried for a long time.
At least stick to one font, Ash.
Stick to one font. Let's just start with that. That's fine. Yes.
But it's not fun.
Ash, bring it home. We're over.
Yeah. Anyway, Josh, thanks so much. Thanks for also, and sorry for going over your time. It really, it's been an honor. Anything that people should look out for? Your podcast is a big thing, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So Martin's holding up the book. The book's still available. 5-year anniversary. And you won't get the hard copy. You can still get the soft copy. Also available digital. If you love the sounds of my voice, you can get the audio book. But you can also go to my website, greatmondays.com, and you get a bunch of free downloads. All the exercises are there as PDFs. You can find all of our tools on Miro as well. We did Miro templates, which is amazing. I guess the big thing that I've been working on, and this is the end of the 2nd year of my podcast, Great Mondays Radio, candid conversation with culture leaders. And I get some really interesting folks on, and then ask them questions that most organizations, or most times, they don't get asked. Really, I try to lean into what are they seeing coming down the road, what's coming up, and try to extract some really interesting ideas and applicable ideas. And sometimes they're not even conversation; they're culture adjacent conversations, which I think is really, really compelling as well. So please, it's everywhere that you can get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube if you want to check it out there. Really appreciate it. You guys, thanks for letting me come on and finding me and asking me to come on finally.
Mate, you're a don.
Thank you. So many gems there. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Bye, guys.
Mate.
Thank you.
Let's
Bye,
check
guys.
in soon,
Happy
man.
Friday and go Great Mondays.
Yeah.
I could have gone for hours.
Wait, we're well over.
Brilliant conversation.
Hours. Like his stuff, his frameworks, his shit on Miro, priceless. Like this is the only way I do values. When we do values in brand strategy, Josh's way is the only way, because you go beyond just picking words into activation, into behaviors, into ritual, into cues, and ultimately into culture. So go and please do check his stuff, because this guy is ace.
I think the bit that he was alluding to that he didn't say outright, but everything is grounded in purpose. Right? when we
Yeah,
understand this
yeah, yeah.
culture wheel. All our values go back to that one purpose. You know, our rituals go back to that purpose. Our cues go back to that purpose. Recognition
Yeah.
goes to. So it's always purpose grounded, right? And that helps us then justify why we have these values, why we do these rituals, you know. And he
Yeah.
started alluding a bit what David Aker was saying about social purpose and business purpose, right? He was
Correct.
alluding into the case
The
studies that he
difference.
was using.
Mm.
So it's all starting to come together, you know.
Yeah. Right, go on, because Wes is on his like 20th beer, so he needs to
I'm not-
have his.
This is last day of holiday,
Last
Wes.
day.
Go enjoy it, buddy.
Yeah.
Rude boy.
Rude boy for the win.
All right, I love this.
Have a
Bye,
great
guys.
weekend, everyone.
Peace, y'all.
Love ya.
Yeah.